Here's the thing nobody told you when you started gardening. Water is not the problem. How you deliver it is. The average home gardener waters every single day. They walk out in the morning, give everything a quick drink, feel good about it, and move on. It becomes a habit, a ritual, and because the plants don't immediately die, it feels like the right thing to do. But that surface-level watering, fast, frequent, shallow, is doing something to your plants that takes weeks to notice and months to fix. It's training their roots to stay near the surface. It's telling the root system, stay shallow because the water will always be up here. And shallow roots mean fragile plants. Fragile plants means you need to water again tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. You've accidentally built a system that demands your time every single day. It's not your fault. Nobody explains this when they hand you a hose. Everything I'm about to walk you through is a direct replacement for daily watering. Not a tweak, not a minor adjustment, a complete rethink. And most of these are either free, nearly free, or a one-time setup that pays you back for years. Let's go through them. Deep watering. Before anything else, before any tool, any product, any system, there's one principle that changes everything. Water deeply and far less often. Here's what deep watering means. Instead of giving your garden a light drink every day, you give it a long, slow soaking session every 5 to 7 days. You water until moisture has penetrated 8 to 10 inches below the surface. Not 1 inch, not 2, 8 to 10. Why does that matter? Because that's where roots want to go. Plant roots are not lazy, they are reactive. They follow water. If water is always sitting at 1 inch deep, roots cluster at 1 inch deep. But if you force the water down to 8 or 10 inches, the roots chase it. And as they chase it, they go deeper. They anchor. They find pockets of nutrients that surface roots never touch. They build a reserve system that can carry the plant through days of heat without you doing a single thing. A plant with deep roots is fundamentally different from a plant with shallow roots. It's more drought tolerant. It's more nutrient efficient. It's structurally stronger. And here's the financial part. It needs you less. Once you build a deep root system, you can miss a day. You can miss 2 days. The plant isn't panicking because it has access to moisture you put down a week ago, still sitting deep in the soil, still available. Most people never experience this because they never give the water time to sink. They're too busy. They give a quick dose, see the surface go dark, and walk away feeling satisfied. That water is gone within hours, evaporated before it ever reached the root zone that matters. The fix is simple, but it requires patience. Water slowly. Let the hose run at low pressure. Use a soaker hose or a drip line. Give it 45 minutes to an hour. Then check your work. Push a trowel into the soil the next day and look at how far down the moisture goes. If it's only 2 inches, you need to go longer. Once you hit that 8 to 10 inch saturation consistently, you'll notice something quiet happening over the next few weeks. Your plants stop looking anxious. They stand differently. They look settled. There's also a financial reality here that doesn't get talked about enough. When you water shallowly every day, you're applying water in a way that maximizes evaporation. The surface of soil is where moisture loss is greatest, directly exposed to sun and wind. When you water deeply and infrequently, you're putting water where the sun can't reach it, and where the wind doesn't touch it. That water stays in the ground longer and gets used more efficiently. You're spending less water to accomplish more. For most gardeners, switching to a deep watering schedule of every 5 to 7 days adjusted for rainfall, your soil type, and your climate will cut their total water use by 30 to 40% without any other changes. Not because they're trying to save water, but because they stopped throwing it away at the surface. And you'll realize you've been watering every day not because your garden needed it, but because shallow watering forces you to come back. Deep watering breaks that cycle permanently. Mulch. If you're not mulching heavily, you are losing water before your plants ever get to use it. And that loss is silent, invisible, and relentless. Here's what happens to exposed soil on a hot day. The sun hits the surface, and moisture begins evaporating almost immediately. Within hours, the top several inches of soil can go from moist to dry. By the time the afternoon heat peaks, that surface layer is parched, cracked, and pulling moisture up from below like a wick, effectively draining the deeper moisture you worked hard to put down. So you water again the next morning, and the cycle repeats. Mulch breaks that cycle, a 2 to 3 inch layer of organic mulch. Wood chips, shredded leaves, straw, bark, acts as an insulating blanket over your soil. It blocks the sun from hitting the surface directly. It dramatically slows evaporation. It keeps the soil cooler. And when you do water, that moisture stays in the ground far longer because it has a barrier between it and the atmosphere. The research is consistent. Mulched soil retains moisture significantly longer than bare soil. In practical terms, a garden bed covered with 3 inches of wood chip mulch may only need water half as often as the same bed without mulch. Half. That's not a marginal improvement. That's cutting your watering labor in half for essentially no cost. Because here's what most people miss about mulch. It's almost always free. Tree services and arborists chip wood constantly and often need somewhere to drop it. Many municipalities offer free wood chips to residents. Shredded leaves from your own yard cost nothing. Fall's leaf drop is one of the best mulching resources you have, and most gardeners bag it up and throw it away. They're throwing away free water retention. Mulch also suppresses weeds, which compete with your plants for moisture. It feeds the soil as it breaks down, improving the texture and water-holding capacity of the ground beneath it. It moderates soil temperature in both directions, cool in summer, slightly insulated in cold. And it makes your beds look intentional and well-kept, which matters if you're growing food for your family or building the kind of garden that holds its value. Lay it down 3 inches deep. Keep it a few inches away from the base of plant stems. Refresh it once a year. That's the entire maintenance cost. What you get back in saved water, saved time, and stronger soil is compounded over every single season you grow. One more thing about mulch that rarely gets mentioned. It changes the economics of soil amendment over time. As organic mulch breaks down, it feeds the microorganisms in your soil. Those microorganisms produce compounds that bind soil particles together into aggregates, tiny clusters of soil that hold both water and air simultaneously. A mulched bed, over 2 or 3 seasons, develops a different soil structure than an unmulched bed. It becomes more porous, more moisture retentive, more alive. You're not just preventing evaporation. You're quietly building a better quality growing medium with every season that passes. The mulch on the surface today is the improved soil of next year. It's one of the few garden inputs that actually gets more valuable over time rather than being used up. Allah's before modern irrigation, before timers and drip lines and smart sensors, farmers in China, northern Africa, and across the ancient world had already solved the daily watering problem. They buried clay pots. An Allah, pronounced Oya, is an unglazed terracotta vessel buried in the soil with just the opening above the surface. You fill it with water every few days. The water seeps slowly through the porous clay walls directly into the surrounding soil. And here's the part that makes it remarkable. The release rate is self-regulating. When the soil around the Allah is dry, soil moisture tension. The suction created by dry soil pulls water out of the clay faster. When the soil is already moist, that tension decreases and the release slows. The Allah responds to what the soil actually needs, automatically, with no sensors, no electronics, no programming. It is demand-driven irrigation, and it was engineered thousands of years before we had the words for it. Studies comparing Allah irrigation to overhead watering have found water savings of up to 70%. 70, that's not a rounding error. If you're paying a water bill or you're on a restricted supply, or you're growing in a dry climate where every drop is precious, that number should stop you cold. You can make an Allah right now for about $5. Take 2 unglazed terracotta pots of the same size. Plug the drainage holes, a piece of tile, some waterproof adhesive or caulk works. Glue the two pots together at their rims with waterproof sealant. Bury the pot in your bed so that only the opening sits above the soil surface. Fill it every 2 to 5 days depending on your climate. Cover the opening with a stone or a saucer to prevent evaporation and keep insects out. One ala handles a 4 by 4 foot area. Your plants will organize their roots around it. They'll grow toward the moisture, and once established, they'll manage their own intake without any input from you. You can go away for a few days. You can miss a morning. The system is working whether you're there or not. This is the kind of technique that makes you feel like you found a cheat code, because in a sense you have. And the fact that it predates almost every gardening technology we currently think of as modern says something important about what we've forgotten. The rush toward convenience. Drip irrigation. Most people think drip irrigation is complicated, expensive, or only for serious growers. That perception is keeping them chained to a hose every morning. A basic drip system for a home garden is not complicated. It is a length of narrow tubing connected to your outdoor faucet, with small emitters placed at each plant's base. The emitters release water at a slow, controlled rate, typically measured in gallons per hour, not gallons per minute. That slow drip delivers water directly to the root zone, below the foliage, where it can actually be absorbed. The efficiency improvement over any other method is significant. Drip irrigation can use 30 to 50% less water than sprinklers or overhead watering. The reasons are straightforward. The water goes exactly where it needs to go. None of it wets foliage, where it does nothing useful and actually invites fungal disease. None of it hits the walkways between beds. None of it blows away in the wind. Every drop is targeted, but the more important benefit isn't the water savings. It's what drip does to your soil biology. When you water overhead, you saturate the soil to capacity, then let it dry almost completely before the next session. That wet-to-dry cycle is stressful for roots and stressful for the microorganisms in your soil that your plants depend on. Drip irrigation eliminates that cycle. It maintains a consistent moisture level. The soil is never flooded and never parched. It sits in that steady middle zone where roots thrive and soil biology flourishes. Healthy soil biology breaks down organic matter into nutrients your plants can use. It builds structure that improves drainage and water retention simultaneously. It creates a living ecosystem in your beds that makes growing easier year after year. Consistent moisture from drip irrigation supports that ecosystem. Feast and famine overhead watering disrupts it. Add a programmable timer, a device that costs $10 to $20 and attaches directly to your outdoor faucet. And the system runs without you. You set the days and duration. The timer opens the valve, runs the drip, and closes it again. You don't need to be home. You don't need to remember. It happens. The initial setup is a few hours. The maintenance is minimal, flushing the lines occasionally, checking emitters aren't clogged. The payoff is a system that waters your garden more intelligently than you could by hand, every time, automatically for years. Let's put an actual number on that. A basic drip system for a raised bed garden costs between $30 and $100 to set up, depending on the size. If your garden was previously consuming $100 a year in extra water use from inefficient overhead watering, that system pays for itself in one season, and it runs for a decade. The compounding math on a $10 per year maintenance cost against a one-time $80 investment, eliminating hundreds of dollars in water waste over a 10-year period, is straightforwardly one of the best returns in any home garden setup. More importantly, consistent moisture that drip irrigation maintains removes a major source of plant stress that most people never connect to the problems they see. Blossom end rot in squash, splitting in root vegetables, bitter flavor in leafy greens. Many of these problems trace back to inconsistent watering, too wet then too dry then too wet again. A drip system running on a schedule eliminates that inconsistency. The plants grow more steadily, more predictably, and more productively. You get better harvests from the same amount of effort, or honestly, Less effort, that's the deal. Wicking beds. A wicking bed is a raised garden bed with a hidden water reservoir sealed into its base. You fill the reservoir from a pipe that sticks up through the soil surface. The water sits below the growing medium and is pulled upward into the soil through capillary action, the same physical force that makes water climb up a paper towel when you touch its edge to a wet surface. The plant's roots grow down toward the water source. They access moisture from below on their own schedule, taking what they need when they need it. You refill the reservoir every few days or less, instead of watering from above every day. This is not a gimmick. Sub-irrigation is one of the most efficient watering methods available to home gardeners, and it produces results that are difficult to argue with. Because the water comes from below and never touches the soil surface, evaporation is almost zero. Foliage stays dry, which dramatically reduces fungal disease. Weeds find it harder to germinate because the surface soil stays relatively dry. And because the reservoir provides a consistent supply, roots don't chase water laterally or shallowly. They go deep, into the wicking zone, where moisture and nutrients are concentrated. Building a wicking bed during a new garden construction is straightforward. The bed needs to be watertight at the base. A pond liner works. You lay perforated pipe at the bottom to distribute water across the reservoir. Cover it with a separation fabric to keep soil out. Add a lightweight growing mix above that. And your fill pipe and an overflow drain complete the system. That overflow drain is important. It prevents the reservoir from overfilling and drowning roots. What most people don't realize is that a wicking bed changes the economics of gardening significantly. In a standard bed, water loss from evaporation and runoff can be enormous. In a wicking bed, nearly all the water you put in eventually reaches a root. You might refill the reservoir once or twice a week versus watering daily. That's a 70 to 80% reduction in your time and water use, built into the structure of the bed itself. This is a one-time investment that then works passively, season after season. You build it once and the physics do the rest. That's the kind of compounding return that makes gardening actually sustainable over the long term. Hugelkultur. This is the one that genuinely surprises people when they first hear it. Not because it sounds impressive, because it sounds too simple. Hugelkultur, a German word that loosely means mound culture, is the practice of burying logs, branches, and wood debris beneath your growing soil. The buried wood acts as a long-term sponge. It absorbs water during rain or irrigation, holds it like a reservoir inside the soil itself, and releases it slowly to plant roots over time. As the wood breaks down over years, it also becomes rich compost, continuously improving the soil above it. A well-built hugelkultur bed can become largely self-sufficient for water within 2 to 3 years of establishment. The wood core beneath the surface creates a moisture bank that doesn't empty quickly. Gardeners in dry climates who have built these beds often report being able to skip watering for a week or more during summer without plant stress, because the buried wood is releasing moisture slowly from its internal reserve. Here's what makes this particularly interesting. You're not buying anything. You're using material that most people consider waste. Fallen branches from a storm cleanup, old logs from a tree that came down, stumps, brush. Material that would otherwise go to the landfill, get burned, or sit rotting in a pile. You bury it, and over time, it quietly transforms your soil into a moisture-holding, nutrient-rich growing environment that gets better every year. The process is simple. Dig down 6 to 8 inches into your bed area. Lay your largest logs at the bottom. Stack smaller branches and woody material on top. Cover with a layer of compost, then your topsoil. Plant into the mounded surface. The mound will settle over time as the wood decompresses. This is expected and desirable. In the first year, you may need to water slightly more than a conventional bed, because the fresh wood absorbs moisture while it begins to break down. But by year 2, the dynamic shifts. The wood has become saturated and begins releasing. By year 3, your maintenance burden has dropped dramatically. By year 5, you have soil so rich and moisture retentive that you're essentially gardening on a sponge. This is the longest-term investment on this list, but it's also the one with the longest payoff. You build it once and it keeps working for 10, 15, 20 years, improving your soil structure. Here's a truth that gets buried under advice about tools and systems. The soil itself is the most important watering tool you have. Sandy soil drains too fast. Water pours through it and is gone before roots can capture it. Clay soil is the opposite. It holds water but can become waterlogged, suffocating roots and creating conditions for rot. Both are problems. Both force you to water more often, more carefully, and with less predictable results. The fix for both is the same: organic matter, specifically compost. Compost changes the physical structure of soil at a microscopic level. In sandy soil, it acts as a binder, creating particles that hold together and retain moisture instead of letting it drain straight through. In clay soil, it opens up the density and creates air pockets that allow both drainage and aeration, preventing that waterlogged state while still holding more moisture than raw clay. The result in both cases is what growers call loamy soil: dark, rich, moisture-retentive but well-draining. The kind of soil that holds water at root level without drowning anything. But compost does something else that doesn't get talked about enough. It feeds the microbial life in your soil. And that microbial life, bacteria, fungi, nematodes, earthworms, creates what's known as soil aggregates. These are tiny clusters of soil particles held together by biological glue produced by microbes. Aggregated soil has more pore space. More pore space means better water infiltration, better moisture retention, and better root penetration. In other words, a biologically alive soil naturally holds water better than dead soil, regardless of what you do on the surface. Work compost into your beds at a ratio of about 30% by volume to start. Then top dress with an inch of compost every season. Over 2 to 3 seasons, the transformation in your soil will be visible. It will look different, smell different, feel different, and you will water far less often because the soil is doing the storage work for you. This is not a fast payoff, but it is a compounding one. Better soil next year means even better soil the year after. And every year your soil improves, your watering burden decreases while your yields increase. That is the definition of compounding advantage. Rain barrels and water harvesting every time it rains. Thousands of gallons of water fall on your property. Most of it runs off the roof, down the downspouts, across the lawn, and into the drainage system. It's gone. You'll pay for municipal water the next time you need to irrigate, even though thousands of gallons just fell from the sky for free. A rain barrel changes that equation. A standard 55-gallon rain barrel connects to a downspout and captures runoff from your roof during a rain event. A modest rainfall on an average-sized roof can fill that barrel in minutes. Connect 2 barrels together and you double your storage. Elevate the barrel on a stand of cinder blocks, and you get enough gravity pressure to run a soaker hose directly from the spigot without a pump. The economics here are simple. In many regions, outdoor watering accounts for 30 to 50% of residential water use. That's a large portion of your water bill driven entirely by garden irrigation. Rainwater collected and stored for free use throughout dry periods reduces or eliminates that cost directly. In drought-prone areas, it reduces dependence on restricted municipal supplies. And rainwater is, in most cases, better for your plants than treated tap water. It's soft, free of chlorine, and naturally slightly acidic, conditions that many food-producing plants prefer. The deeper value, though, is resilience. A garden that can run off stored rainwater is a garden that is insulated from drought restrictions, from water price increases, from supply interruptions. You've created a buffer between your food production and external systems you don't control. In a world where weather is increasingly unpredictable and municipal water costs have nowhere to go but up, that buffer is worth building. A basic rain barrel setup costs between $20 and $75. Some municipalities offer rebates or subsidized barrels specifically to encourage this practice. A more elaborate cistern system can hold hundreds or thousands of gallons, but even a single 55-gallon barrel, positioned under a downspout and connected to your garden, is a meaningful step toward a system that costs you less every year it runs. And there's something else worth saying here. The act of collecting rainwater shifts your mental relationship with water in your garden. Instead of treating irrigation as an operating expense that you just accept and pay for, you start seeing rainfall as a resource to be captured and managed. You start thinking about your roof area, your gutters, your downspout placement. You start noticing how much your area gets and when. That awareness makes you a smarter grower. You water less casually. You irrigate with intention. And over time, that intentionality extends to every other part of how you manage your garden. The gardeners who water wisely don't just have better systems. They see water differently. Rain barrels are often where that shift begins. Hydrozoning this one is so simple that most gardeners overlook it entirely. Yet it might save more time and water than any other change on this list, depending on what your garden currently looks like. Hydrozoning means grouping plants by their water needs and positioning them together in the same area of your garden. Right now, if you have drought-tolerant herbs planted next to moisture-loving leafy greens, you have a problem. The herbs want to be on the dry side. The greens want consistent moisture. If you water to satisfy the greens, you're overwatering the herbs. Overwatered herbs develop weak flavor, poor structure, and root rot over time. If you water to satisfy the herbs, the greens stress. Either way, somebody suffers, and you're watering the entire space when only part of it needs water. The solution is to stop mixing plants with incompatible water needs in the same zone. Group your drought-tolerant plants, rosemary, oregano, lavender, sage, certain native perennials, in one section. Water that zone infrequently and deeply. Group your water-loving crops, lettuce, basil, celery, anything that wilts quickly, in a separate zone. Water that zone more regularly. The zones become self-consistent and easy to manage. When you combine hydrozoning with a drip system on a timer, the effect multiplies. Each zone gets exactly the watering schedule it needs. You're not watering the whole garden on one program and hoping for the best. You're giving each group of plants its ideal conditions without any extra effort, because the system has been designed around their actual requirements. This also makes it far easier to notice problems. When all your high-water plants are together and one of them looks stressed, it stands out. When they're scattered across the garden, a struggling plant is much harder to catch early. Hydrozoning doesn't require any new tools or materials. It just requires thinking about your garden differently before you plant, or being willing to move a few things during the next planting window. The payoff is a more water-efficient garden, healthier plants in every zone, and a dramatically simpler irrigation routine. A soil moisture meter. Everything on this list becomes more effective when you stop assuming and start measuring. And the simplest way to measure is a soil moisture meter. Most daily waterers don't water because they've checked whether the soil actually needs water. They water because it's morning, because it's what they've always done, because the surface looks a little dry. Surface appearance tells you almost nothing meaningful about what's happening 4, 6, or 8 inches below, which is where the root zone is. A soil moisture meter is a probe you push into the ground that gives you a reading of the moisture level at root depth. They cost $10 to $30. They require no batteries in most versions. They take 3 seconds to use. And they tell you with certainty whether your garden needs water right now. What most gardeners discover when they start using one is that they've been watering on days when the soil is already adequately moist. The meter says moist, so you skip watering that day. And nothing bad happens, because the soil had what it needed. You just couldn't see it. Over time, the meter teaches you the rhythm of your specific garden, how quickly your soil dries after a deep watering, how much rainfall actually penetrates the surface, how different areas of your garden hold moisture differently. That knowledge is genuinely valuable. It makes everything else on this list more precise. Deep watering becomes more intentional when you know exactly how long it takes your soil to reach optimal depth. Drip timing becomes more accurate when you can verify what the emitters are actually doing. Mulch decisions become clearer when you can measure the difference in moisture retention before and after you apply it. Think of the moisture meter as the one tool that calibrates everything else. It is the check on your assumptions, and the first time it tells you not to water when you would have automatically reached for the hose. You'll understand why this matters. Morning watering, not random watering. Timing is silent efficiency. This one isn't a tool or a system. It's a habit, but it quietly saves a significant amount of water and protects your plants from a problem that builds invisibly over time. If you water in the middle of the day, which many people do when they finally get around to it, a large percentage of that water evaporates before it reaches roots. The sun is at its strongest. Soil temperatures are high. Water on the surface can evaporate within minutes. Water on foliage dries rapidly, but also magnifies light in ways that can cause leaf scorch. If you water in the evening, which many people do because mornings are busy, you get better penetration, but foliage stays wet through the night. Wet leaves in the dark are an invitation for fungal disease, powdery mildew, leaf spot, and other conditions that spread quickly, damage plants quietly, and are difficult to reverse once established. Morning watering specifically. Early morning before 10 o'clock solves both problems. The temperatures are low, so evaporation is minimal. The sun is gentle, and whatever moisture lands on leaves or soil surface will dry quickly as the day warms up, before fungal spores can take hold. Meanwhile, the water you've delivered has all day to move down through the soil and reach roots. This is a zero-cost optimization. You're not changing how much you water or even how often. You're only changing when. But that timing difference can meaningfully reduce your total water use because you're losing less to evaporation. And it can meaningfully reduce disease pressure because you're keeping foliage dry overnight. Combined with a timer on your drip or soaker system, you can set early morning delivery once and never think about it again. The system waters before you wake up, at the optimal moment consistently, without your involvement. There's a compounding benefit here that isn't immediately obvious. When you water at the right time consistently, you reduce disease pressure over the entire growing season. Fewer fungal problems means fewer interventions, fewer sprays, fewer lost plants, fewer replanting decisions. A garden that doesn't develop disease routinely is a garden that grows more predictably and delivers a better harvest. That's a payoff that extends well beyond water savings. This is also the one change that costs you nothing at all. You don't need new equipment. You don't need to spend a single dollar. You just need to shift when you're doing something you're already doing. And the results show up immediately. Now stop for a moment. You've just gone through 11 different ways to stop watering your garden every day. And if you looked at that list and felt slightly overwhelmed, you're human. Nobody is asking you to do all 11 at once. That's not how this works. What I want you to do is pick two. Just two. Pick the two that match where you are right now. If you've got a few hours and a budget of nothing, deep watering and mulching will change your garden's behavior within weeks. If you're a builder and want something with a 20-year payoff, try Hugelkultur. If you want the most ancient, lowest maintenance system available, bury an Allah and see what happens. Every single one of these approaches represents a permanent shift in how your garden uses water, not a temporary fix, not a band-aid, a structural change that compounds over time. The mulch gets better, the soil improves, the wood decomposes into compost and releases moisture for years. The drip system pays for itself season after season. Most people garden in a way that requires daily attention because nobody told them it doesn't have to. The garden becomes a chore, something that owns your mornings, something that stresses you out when you travel or miss a day. But gardening built on these principles moves in a different direction. The system holds more water, loses less water, and needs you less over time. That means more freedom, more resilience, and honestly, more enjoyment because you're not running outside every morning out of obligation. You're out there by choice. The gardeners who figured this out didn't work harder. They worked less, but they worked smarter. They stopped showing up every day to water weak, shallow roots that they had trained to depend on them. And they started building systems, soil, structure, method, that didn't need rescuing. You can do the same thing. Starting now, pick your two. Start this week. And come back in a month and tell me what you notice.